17 Spine-chilling Walmart nightmares. Discover the cursed secrets I should be exposed sooner. Ruth had always thought that working nights at Walmart was a safe bet. Her heart pounded in her chest as she dragged herself through the dimly lit aisles of the store. The fluorescent lights flickered above, casting eerie shadows that twisted and turned in unsettling ways. In Millfield, Wisconsin, with its crumbling economy, this job was a lifeline, the only thing keeping her and her teenage daughter, Emily, above water. Yet tonight, an ominous dread wrapped around her like a heavy blanket. The walls felt like they were closing in, and she could almost hear the whispers. Just the fatigue, she muttered to herself, pushing her cart past the slowly emptying shelves filled with half-stocked goods. But the whispers were there, weaving through the silence. Ruth, they echoed, soft yet haunting, making her skin crawl. With each shuffling footstep, the sense of familiarity turned to something menacing. As she worked through her shift, a chill danced up her spine. Odd things started happening. A jar of pickles was out of place on the shelf. An eerie cold draft brushed against her neck, despite the store's climate control systems functioning well. Her heartbeat crescendoed in her ears as she rationalized the bizarre occurrences. Fatigue? Stress? It had to be that, but then she discovered the cameras. Hidden behind the shelves, their small red lights burned like tiny glowing eyes, and a knot of dread twisted in her stomach. Who monitored them? The feeling of being watched seeped deeper into her thoughts. Perhaps she was just paranoid, but every time she caught sight of her coworkers glancing sideways, that sense of distrust bubbled inside her. They weren't her allies anymore, they were shadows lurking with secrets. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The dread cracked up a notch. Her coworkers exchanged hushed words filled with glances and tension. Ruth sank into a feeling of isolation. When did the job that provided her security turn into something suffocating? It felt like living in a ghost town, where the spirits of happier times tangled with shadows of dread. The inevitable surfaced one fateful Thursday night when the wind howled beyond the store's walls. Freezing rain draped Millfield in a shroud of white. The snowstorm quickly locked the doors behind her, trapping Ruth and Emily inside. Panic pulsed through her veins as fluorescent lights flickered ominously, casting strange, dancing shadows that felt alive. "Mom?" Emily's voice trembled as they moved deeper into the desolate expanse of the store. Ruth held her hand, her grip tightening like a vice. Shadows shifted, and then they saw him. James. The familiar, polite colleague with the disarming smile now appeared dangerously menacing, prowling the aisles with lurking intent. "Run!" Ruth's heart raced. They sprinted, but every turn felt wrong, every aisle disorienting as James stalked behind them, a predator in the dark. His laughter echoed, twisting into something sinister. No phones, no hope, just the oppressive weight of the walls closing in, and the reality that the man who had been part of their community might be the very monster she feared. Ruth's instinct screamed at her. But then she glimpsed something startling among the chaos. A slip of paper tucked in the stockroom, a secret that unraveled the threads of complicity she never saw. How could the same people she worked beside harbor such darkness? With dread pooling in her stomach, she faced an unbearable choice: expose the truth and risk everything or remain silent, protecting the fragile life she built for herself and Emily. For as the shadows stretched and whispers turned to wails, Ruth realized the aisles of her workplace had become a labyrinth of fears where nightmares lurked, and the end was far from certain. Panic coursed through Ruth like ice water as she clutched Emily's hand. Every instinct told her to keep running, but the stockroom loomed ahead, ominous and dark, its entrance a gaping mouth ready to swallow them whole. Shadows darted in the corners, blurring her vision as she hesitated. "Mom," Emily whispered, voice thick with fear. The sound of James's footsteps echoed behind them, a steady drumroll marking their impending doom. "No!" Ruth snapped, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "We can't hide. We have to find a way out." With determination, they darted into the stockroom, where the familiar clutter now felt foreign and frightening. Abandoned boxes piled high formed an unsettling maze. The fluorescent lights above buzzed angrily, casting elongated shadows that flickered like restless spirits. "Do you see anything?" Ruth's voice trembled despite her effort to sound strong. Emily shook her head, tears pooling in her eyes. "What if he finds us?" Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the main aisle, sending both of them jumping. Ruth forced her breath to steady, gripping the strap of her apron like a lifeline. "Stay quiet. We need to think." Panic ignited in her chest as she realized they might not escape. The walls closed in, and the whispers grew louder, twisting around her thoughts like fingers tightening around her throat. She plunged her hand into the nearest box, searching frantically, her heart racing as she pulled out a box cutter. It felt cold and heavy in her palm, a weapon against the fear. Just as she turned to Emily, a flicker of movement caught her eye. A shadow darted outside the stockroom door. Ruth froze, the knife grasped tightly, every muscle tensed. Could it be James? Or were there other threats lurking in the dark? "Mom, we should go back." Emily strained her voice, but Ruth shook her head. "No. We can't go back. We need to figure out what's happening. This isn't just about us anymore." Her mind raced back to the slip of paper she had seen. There had to be something on it, something that explained the malevolence brewing beneath the surface. She edged closer to the door, peeking out. "Mom, don't." Emily's voice turned shrill, but Ruth didn't pull back. Instead, she caught sight of James's posture, severe, prowling the aisles like a wolf stalking sheep, his eyes hunting. Then, in a cruel twist of fate, they caught movement from deeper within the store. A group of employees hovered, whispering urgently to one another. Shadows danced behind them, forming shapes that could not be real. Fear and confusion spread through Ruth's heart. Were they in on this? Had they somehow helped James? The murmurs grew closer, a terrifying hiss of conspiratorial tones. "She knows we can't let her leave." A chill slithered down Ruth's spine. "Emily, we need to find that paper. It's our only chance," she murmured, backing further into the stockroom. As they crouched behind the boxes, the whispers intensified around them, a chorus of betrayal. Ruth's thoughts tangled as she wondered how deep the web of horrors reached. Could she trust anyone here? Anyone at all? But then the lights buzzed violently, illuminating the dark for a moment, and Ruth glimpsed something out of the corner of her eye. The slip of paper. It lay crumpled beneath a fallen box, its edges stained and torn. Was it worth the risk? Before she could decide, the door swung open, and James stood there, a predator triumphant in the fading light. "Found you," he snarled, eyes gleaming with an unsettling hunger. Ruth's heart dropped. There was no escape. But still there was the paper. Desperation gnawed at her insides. Could they find a way through the maze of nightmares? With a sudden ferocity, Ruth seized Emily's hand and charged toward the back of the stockroom. "Push! We need to get out." But James was fast, right behind them. The air thickened, and time slowed as Ruth's mind raced. If the truth lay in that slip of paper, it might change everything. Or push them deeper into the abyss. The walls were closing in, and the laughing shadows leered at her despair. How could she confront this darkness without losing it all? Every heartbeat echoed in her ears as they barreled towards the exit. Would the truth set them free or seal their fates? And as they burst through the door, the answer awaited in the dark, one she wasn't prepared to face. They burst into a narrow corridor leading deeper into the store, the fluorescent lights above flickering ominously. Shadows clung to the walls, sending new chills down Ruth's spine, but there was no turning back. She led Emily onward, adrenaline pumping, every instinct screaming that they had to keep moving. "Mom, we can't hide forever." Emily's voice trembled, her panic spilling out like water from a broken dam. "I know, honey, but if we can find the way out, if we can find that paper." Ruth's words faded as she spotted another exit, a fire door at the end of the hall, partially ajar. It whispered promises of freedom, but the thought of what lay beyond clawed at her mind. They rushed toward it, but Ruth's instincts kicked in as she slowed her pace just before they reached the door. "Wait, I need to listen." They stood in silence, hearts pounding in their chests, feeling exposed. The distant echoes of footsteps returned, reverberating against the walls. They were close. Too close. "Please, Mom," Emily begged, her voice breaking as she glanced back over her shoulder, wide eyes reflecting terror. Ruth held her breath and strained to hear past the humming lights. The whispers of the employees echoed in her mind. What did they know? Why were they conspiring against them? Then she heard it, a short, frantic gasp followed by a soft thud. The sound sliced through her terror like a knife. Someone was in trouble. "Mom!" Emily whispered urgently, pulling on her sleeve. "No!" Ruth hissed, gripping Emily's arm gently but firmly. "We can't help them. We have to go." She took a step toward the exit, ready to yank the door open, but doubt froze her in place. Something about the shadows moving at the edge of her vision felt wrong. They were alive, watching. Without warning, the fire door swung open. James stood there, a wicked grin splitting his face, eyes glimmering with sadistic glee. "Did you really think you could escape? You belong to us now." Ruth surged back, heart racing. Emily gasped, the fear palpable between them. Together forever, right? He tilted his head, feigning innocence, but the menace underneath dripped like poison. "But you made things messy, didn't you? Now it all has to be cleaned up. Run!" Ruth screamed, pushing Emily in front of her, but James was quick. He lunged, grabbing at his prey. Ruth flung herself into the maze of boxes, her breath coming in sharp gasps. They zigzagged through, desperate to lose him among the clutter. Boxes toppled behind them as James pursued, laughing as if this were all some sick game. "Mom! I can't!" Emily cried, tripping over a stray box. Ruth felt the tug on her heart, but she couldn't stop. Not now. They had to reach that slip of paper. "Get up. We need to go," Ruth urged, her own body trembling. She pulled Emily to her feet, glancing back over her shoulder only to see James gain ground, unfazed and formidable. Just a little closer, his voice echoed, a sickly sweet whisper that made the hairs on her neck stand on end. A rush of adrenaline coursed through Ruth, urging her onward. She spotted a conduit behind some stacks, a narrow opening. It was worth the risk. "There!" she shouted, pointing as she sprinted towards it. The low crawlspace beckoned, dark and cramped, but there was no choice. They dove in, the scent of mildew and dust enveloping them as they edged deeper into the tight confines. Ruth squeezed her eyes shut, breathing steadily for Emily's sake, willing herself not to panic. Then, just as they settled into the darkness, a loud crash reverberated behind them. A wild howl followed, deep and menacing, much closer than before. James must have found another way in. All around them, the stockroom groaned and popped with an unease that was almost alive. "Mom?" Emily's voice quivered, fear flooding back into their moment of safety. "What are we going to do?" With searching hands, Ruth felt her way through the darkness, and then, as if fate willed it, she brushed her fingers across something crumpled. The slip of paper. "Emily, I found it." Ruth gasped, exhilaration flooding her veins. But as she clutched the paper tightly, an ominous noise echoed, shaking the crawlspace. "Do you really want to know?" An echoing voice seeped in from above, thick with malice. James was already in the pathway, ready to unleash a new terror. Ruth's finger trembled as she unfolded the paper, heart in her throat. What horrid secrets did it hold? Would it save them, or ruin them? The darkness pressed in, and Ruth realized the answer lay just beyond the paper. But above all, whose hearing would she trust? Her own bell of caution, or the mysteries that threatened to consume them? A decision loomed, heavy and unyielding. And time was running out. Ruth's fingers grazed the crumpled paper, each fold and crease sending a current of dread through her. She could barely make out the words in the dim light filtering through the tiny gaps in the crawlspace. Her heart raced as she tried to glance up, to search for Emily's eyes, to reassure herself that they were still in this together. "What's on it, Mom?" Emily's whisper was urgent, filled with a cocktail of hope and fear. Ruth gulped, forcing back the panic rising in her throat. "I don't know yet, but we have to." The unmistakable sound of footsteps echoed above, deliberate and slow, as if James was taking pleasure in their fear. "I can smell you, sweet girls," he said, his voice oozing with malicious joy. "You can't hide forever. Don't you know? The walls have ears." Ruth's grip tightened around the paper as her mind raced. What secrets did it reveal? Could it be their salvation? She tried to focus, squinting at the paper, heart hammering. Just then, the ground trembled, and another crash sounded overhead. A massive box fell, its impact sending tremors through the crawlspace. Dust rained down like shattered glass, biting at their lungs. "No, no, no!" Ruth cried, pulling Emily closer as the space shrank around them. They were trapped. "Mom!" Emily's voice quivered, trapped between terror and desperation. "What if he finds us?" Ruth could feel her panic creeping in at the edges of her thoughts, threatening to drown her in hopelessness. "We just have to stay quiet. He's close, but we can't let him hear us." Shadows danced erratically as James moved above, taunting them with shallow laughter. "A game of hide-and-seek, and I always win." Mom. Emily trembled against her, warmth seeping from their shared fear. "What do we do?" Ruth's eyes darted over the paper, searching for any clue that might give them a chance. The words began to blur, crisis fogging her mind. Suddenly, a phrase jumped out, startling her. "The binding mark." "What does that mean?" Emily asked, the disbelief in her voice betraying her hope. Ruth turned the paper over, searching. Somewhere, hidden in the chaos of scribbled notes and symbols was something that felt critical, and a need for clarity drove her forward. The scrawled drawings twisted, revealing a sinister insignia forming a circular pattern, like a web. As she studied it, a growl echoed from above, pulling her focus. James had paused, just above the crawlspace. "I can help you, you know," he crooned, his voice tainted with false sweetness. "If you tell me what you found, we can make this so much easier for everyone." The air grew thick with tension. Should she share whatever was hidden on the paper? Would that give them an advantage, or would it give him power over them? Ruth shook her head violently. She couldn't let him in. "Emily, don't listen to him. His words are a snare." The growl morphed into a high-pitched laugh, and suddenly a bony finger traced the edges of their hiding spot. "Trying to keep secrets? I love secrets." He leaned closer, every inhale sounding slow and deliberate, magnifying her dread. "There has to be a way out," Ruth whispered urgently, her mind racing to think of an escape route. The darkness closed around them like a vice, smothering in its silence. Suddenly, a chilling thought struck her. If this symbol had power, then maybe it could protect them. "Emily," Ruth whispered. "What if we can use the paper to bind him, like he binds us?" What?" Emily replied, confusion mixing with fear. "This mark," Ruth said, a glimmer of reckless hope igniting in her chest. "If we can figure out how to use it, maybe we can turn the tides." The laughter above twisted into something furious, rattling the very walls as he roared, "You think you can control me? You're fools." Ruth's breath quickened, and she felt the weight of time pressing down on them. If she could just decipher the symbol on the paper, it might mean their freedom or it might seal their fate forever. "Hurry, Mom, what do we do?" As the shadows shifted above them, creeping closer, Ruth lifted the paper, hands trembling. The fate of them both lay not only in her grasp, but also in the choices they dared to make. "Trust me," she murmured as something large crashed down above, sending debris skittering across the floor. And in that heartbreaking moment, she knew they had only one chance left to turn the chaos around them into an escape route or face whatever darkness James had planned for them. The sound of footsteps surged closer, mixed with the low growl of a beast poised for attack. Time slipped away, mocking their fear, but would the secret on the paper save them or draw them deeper into the nightmare? Ruth's fingers trembled over the chilling symbol, her breath quickening as the laughter above burrowed deeper into her skull. She couldn't let panic consume her. "Emily," she whispered, voice steely with resolve. "Stay close to me." Emily pressed against her, a small whimper escaping her lips. The oppressive darkness felt alive, wrapping around them, tightening like a noose. But Ruth held on to hope. "We can use this," she breathed. "If we can figure out how to reverse it, maybe we can trap him instead." "Mom, what if it doesn't work?" Emily's voice quaked with unsteady fear. Ruth ignored her. Shadows shifted above, and James's malevolent whispers echoed like liquid ice in her veins. "You think you can turn the tide? But, sweet girls, I am the tide." Ruth squinted at the paper, her heart a frantic drum. "Here," she said, pointing. "This is it. If we can create a circle, if we can draw it out, then maybe it will bind him." The growl morphed into a throaty laugh, and Ruth winced. It seemed James could smell their desperation. "You truly believe the mark can bind me? You'd only make it worse." "Not if we can recreate it, the binding mark." Ruth stammered, her hands instinctively moving to find something sharp among the fallen debris. She needed a tool to carve it into the floor. They had to attempt it, or they would be lost forever. In the distance, panic crept in as footsteps stopped altogether, replaced by an eerie silence. James was unexpectedly still. The air thickened. He was waiting. For what? To savor their dread, perhaps. Ruth felt the tightness in her chest, the bitter taste of fear coating her tongue. "Mom, I can't." Emily hesitated, voice trembling. What if we're just making him angrier?" "Better angry than dead," Ruth snapped, her own voice filled with a wild edge. Turning to Emily, she forced her face steady. "Do you want to sit here and wait for him to find us? Or do you want to fight back?" "Fight," Emily repeated cautiously, and Ruth noticed the spark of determination flicker in her daughter's eyes. With renewed purpose, Ruth searched the shadows for a sharp edge among the scattered debris. Her fingers grazed over glass, and she grabbed a shard, its jagged edge gleaming ominously in the dim light. She held it close, feeling its cold bite against her palm. "Okay, Emily." Ruth took a deep breath, drawing on every ounce of strength she had left. "Help me hold the paper steady." Emily complied, her small hands trembling but focused. The moment felt eternal as Ruth pressed the shard into the floor, carving the sinister insignia into the wood, sweat beading at her brow. An unsettling wind swirled around them, filling the darkness with a harsh, chilling presence. "You're a fool." James's voice snaked through the air, thick with anger. "You can't control what you don't understand." With every stroke, Ruth could feel the intensity pounding in her ears. "We have to hurry," she urged, completing the final line. The last scratch echoed ominously in the cramped space, and the shadows above shifted violently. Just as she stepped back, a loud crash reverberated through the floor, accompanied by an insistent banging, a stark reminder that they were being hunted. "Foolish girls," James sneered, the sentiment dripping like venom from his words. "You've sealed your own fate." Ruth gripped Emily's hand tightly. "Now!" she shouted, as the dark mass of James loomed just above them in a whirlwind of shadows. As if sensing their desperation, the air crackled with energy. The moment felt charged, a heartbeat of something beyond fear. "It's now or never," Ruth yelled, closing her eyes and praying the symbol would hold power, and then silence. The kind of silence that screamed of deep dread, but then a low rumble began, shaking the very foundation around them. "What did you do?" Emily cried, eyes wide with terror. The semblance of calm around them shattered. Something stirred in the shadows, deep and ominous, awakening what had long been dormant. Sudden realization clawed at Ruth's insides. "Emily, we must get out." They had to move. With her heart pounding louder, Ruth led her daughter deeper into the crawlspace, away from the presence looming just above them. But every option seemed blocked, every crack in the wall closed tight. And as the energy swirled around them, Ruth swore she could hear whispers echoing in the dark, promises and taunts swirling in the air. But only one question loomed larger than the others as they stumbled further into darkness: had they truly bound the monster, or had they awakened something far worse? Ruth's grip on Emily tightened as they plunged deeper into the unknown, the weight of their fate hanging in the balance. They had no choice but to uncover the truth, whatever it might bring. As they pressed further into the dark confines of the crawlspace, Ruth could feel the air thickening. It felt charged with something malevolent, crackling around them like electricity in a storm. She squeezed Emily's hand tightly, her grip both a source of comfort and a tether to reality. "Mom, where do we go now?" Emily's voice was barely a whisper, lost in the humid darkness swirling around them. Ruth took a breath, trying to steady herself, to settle the frantic beat of her heart that thudded like a war drum in her chest. They had to keep moving, but every direction seemed to close in on them, walls squeezing tighter, shadows stretching and yawning like hungry mouths waiting to swallow them whole. Just keep going. Trust me." But deep down, uncertainty gnawed at her. Was this the right path? Or just another trap set by the predator waiting above? A sudden rush of wind swept through the crawlspace, chilling Ruth's skin and sending chills through her bones. The whispers intensified, a chaotic chorus of voices layered over one another, mocking and jeering. "They're lost," one murmured, the tone cruel. "They think they can escape." "Stop it!" Ruth shouted, her voice cracking. She didn't want to hear them. Not now. Emily clung to her, a tiny tremor shaking her small body. Suddenly, the shadows began to shift more violently, swirling at the edges of her vision, pulling her focus in every direction. Emily's voice trembled like an echo in a cavern. "What if we can't get out?" With desperation clawing at her throat, Ruth forced herself to think. They needed a plan. Whatever energy they had unleashed needed to be countered, and fast. Emily's fear fed into her own, feeding the darkness that seemed to grow bolder every second. "Listen, Em. We have to find another mark. Maybe it can help pull whatever it is back." "To bind it?" Emily's eyes shone in the faint light, hope flickering like a candle about to be snuffed out. "Yes," Ruth exclaimed. "We have the paper, and there must be something around here to help us draw it. We just need to find some space." But as they turned, a new sound loomed over the whispers, a guttural growl, low and menacing, resonating from beneath the floorboards above. "You think you can escape now?" James's voice slithered through the darkness, dripping with malice. "Did you really think a mere symbol could contain me?" Ruth's stomach dropped. In that moment, she was acutely aware of how little time they had left. "Let us hurry," she urged, desperation rolling off her tongue. They continued through the cramped space, every inch feeling like a mile. Emily gasped, pointing ahead. In a corner, scattered amidst the damp debris, lay remnants of broken toys and discarded items, treasures of forgotten memories. "Look!" She was already kneeling down, her hand brushing the dirt away from a cracked, wooden dollhouse. Inside, resting amid the grime, was a piece of chalk. "Mom, if we can use this, perfect." Ruth snatched it up, the chalk cool in her palm. It felt like a lifeline thrown in a turbulent sea. Now we need a surface. They scrambled forward, stumbling upon a broad patch of floor that seemed to shimmer with latent energy, untouched by the darkness above. Here, they would make their stand. "All right, let us draw it quick," Ruth said, her fingers shaking as she brought the chalk down to the floor. She began to sketch a protective circle, a new mark to trap James. With each stroke, the whispers shifted, a cacophony of panic filtering through as if the presence felt her defiance. Just as Ruth finished the circle, a thunderous crash rumbled overhead. The laughter returned, now twisted and echoing. "You're too late," James howled, his voice rising like an ominous wind. "The tide is turning." With a frantic energy, Ruth and Emily stepped into the circle, hearts pounding in their chests. George's laughter twisted around them, a dark storm building towards an inevitable climax. "Prepare yourself," Ruth whispered fiercely. "We're going to end this." But could they? As the shadows danced closer, the weight of the moment pressed down on them. Ruth felt a flicker of fear. Would this new mark hold any power? Or had they doomed themselves further? And at that moment, just as she drew the final line, the darkness exploded. Just how strong was James's hold over the night? Ruth gasped as the shadows lunged. In that heartbeat, she realized they were about to find out. The shadows surged like a tidal wave, dark tendrils frantically reaching for Ruth and Emily. The air crackled with a ferocious energy, pulling at the edges of their minds. Ruth squeezed Emily's hand tighter, her heart racing not just from fear, but from the desperate hope that their circle would protect them. "Stay inside. Don't move," Ruth shouted, her voice straining against the chaos. The markings flickered, resonating with their presence, a feeble shield against the malevolence above. "Mom!" Emily's eyes brimmed with terror, the glow of sorrow illuminating her small face. "What's happening?" "I don't know," Ruth snapped, straining to keep her composure. Each word felt like a desperate plea. As if in response, the shadows trembled, morphing into more tangible shapes, a claw here, a face there. Flames of panic ignited in her chest. Suddenly, a harsh light flooded the crawlspace, illuminating the swirling shadows. An ethereal figure emerged from the depths of darkness, its eyes a piercing white that seemed to absorb the very light around them. The entity towered above, morphing between undefined forms, a monstrous silhouette with glowing edges. "Did you think a circle can contain me, Ruth?" The voice was a chilling whisper, echoing through the small space and gnawing at her sanity. "You cannot bind what is already free." Ruth's breath caught in her throat. This was no mere figment of her imagination, this was James, incarnate. His presence dripped with an ancient malevolence, a malice that relaxed the very foundation of her reality. "Listen!" Ruth shouted, forcing the words through her fear. "You've taken enough from us." Hope flickered as she thought of the stories she had heard, of the power of names, of the strength written in blood and sacrifice. "Enough?" James laughed, the sound reverberating like chains clanking together, a mockery. "You think you can fight me? You've stumbled into a game far beyond your understanding." With a sudden flick of his wrist, the shadows lunged towards them again, swallowing the harsh light. The protective circle shimmered, straining against the surge, yet it held. Ruth felt the chalk mark bleeding against the darkness, pulsating like a heartbeat, but she sensed it weakening. "We have to hold on," she yelled, her voice hoarse as she searched the darkness for any sign of escape. "We need to break free together." "Together," came Emily's shaky response, whispering a resolve that echoed in the corners of Ruth's heart. They had to stay grounded, rooted in their bond amidst the chaos. Ruth looked down at the circle, at the chalk lines beginning to flicker. "We can't just wait. We need to reinforce this." She dropped to her knees, frantically reinforcing the symbols they had drawn with sharp, deliberate strokes. The energy was building, threatening to shatter around them. And as she worked, she felt something shift in the air. It wasn't just fear anymore, it was a promise. Ruth focused on the protection of her daughter, the unconditional love driving her hand. Come on, Em. Help me. Without hesitation, Emily knelt beside her, eyes wide yet fierce. Together, they drew, filling the air with a determination that radiated against the shadows. But it didn't stop. James's laughter grew darker, more sinister. You cannot bind me. You do not know who you're dealing with. The ground vibrated as if responding to his menace. The darkness around them twisted and pulled, but their will pushed back harder, every stroke igniting a faint glow in the symbols they crafted. Mom! I can feel it. Emily whispered, her brow furrowed as she held her breath, anticipation hanging thick in the air, and in that moment, a fervor erupted inside Ruth. She realized they could channel their fear, amplify their bond into something tangible. Focus on us. She urged. What do we want? A way out. Emily shouted, their voices mingling not just words but a mantra against the chaos. The shadows recoiled, a ripple coursing through the energy, momentarily losing their strength. No! James howled, rage pulsating like a wave. You'll pay for this. A piercing shriek erupted from the darkness, and the world began to fold in on itself. Ruth felt the floor shifting beneath her, each heartbeat a countdown to impending doom. Just then, a crack of light exploded within the circle, blinding and sharp, swallowing the darkness whole. And then silence. Ruth opened her eyes to a void, heart pounding in her chest. They had faced the abyss, but did they truly escape, or had they merely expanded the shadows? What? Ruth gasped, scanning for Emily, panic reigniting within her. But Emily was gone. Ruth's voice trembled as she whispered into the void, Emily? No answer came. And in that chilling stillness, dread slithered back into the silence, heavier than before. The weight of darkness pressed down on Ruth, suffocating her thoughts. Emily. Her voice cracked, desperation rising in her throat like bile. She stumbled, disoriented. The light that had swallowed the shadows was gone, leaving a thick fog of black that seeped into her skin. Ruth fumbled in the dark, her hands clawing at nothingness, every sound amplifying her dread. What if the darkness had snatched Emily away? What if the shadows had devoured her hopes along with her daughter? She took a shaky breath, straining to listen. The silence was broken only by the faint whisper of her own heartbeat, a reminder she was still alive, still fighting. Emily. Ruth called again, forcing her legs to move, searching blindly for any trace of her daughter. She felt nothing but the chilling emptiness. The air shifted, a chilling breeze passing by her face. Mom floated from the shadows, a soft echo, haunting and hollow. It was Emily's voice, but distorted, twisted. Emily? Where are you? Ruth shouted, her heart pounding as she turned toward the sound. The shadows shifted, writhing with an ominous life of their own, creeping closer, insistent and malignant. Mom, help me, the voice pleaded, trembling with fear. Emily. Ruth lunged forward, fueled by panic, her fingers beckoning the darkness as she fought for any scrap of her daughter. But each step felt like wading through treacle, legs heavy, as if the void itself was trying to pull her back into the abyss. Suddenly, the shadows contorted, coalescing into a figure that stood tall and menacing in front of her. The features of James flickered, his eyes glowing like twin suns. You were never meant to find her. The darkness has claimed her. No! Ruth yelled, defiance fueling her voice. She summoned the energy within her, the fierce love for Emily, and grasped her luck. She's not yours. James surged forward, darkness curling at his fingertips. You think your love can save her? She is lost. You have awakened forces you cannot comprehend, and now the price must be paid. Ruth felt her skin prickle. Panic twisted like a blade in her gut. The air crackled with energy, and before she could react, tendrils shot out, wrapping around her wrists and pulling her closer to him. She struggled, gasping, fighting against the inky binds. "Let go. I'll do whatever it takes," she screamed, her heart breaking further at the thought of Emily lost in the shadows. James smirked, his features twisting grotesquely. "You'll pay with what is most precious to you. You will witness your daughter's fate, endlessly." Ruth felt the world around her tremor, the darkness swirling into a vortex. Images formed, lightning-fast flashes of Emily, her daughter, laughing, playing, smiling, all fading away, lost within the black maw of nothingness. "No! Emily!" Ruth cried, her shrieks echoing through the void, collapsing into despair. Just as she felt she would break, something deep within her reignited a spark of hope. A fire fueled by maternal instinct. "Emily needs me." Ruth gasped, struggling against the darkness clinging to her like a second skin. "I won't abandon you." With a force born from love, she summoned her will, sending her mind racing back to the protective circle. In that moment of connection, a beam of light erupted from her fingers. The chalk lines, though distant, pulsed with life. "Together." Ruth called out, her words a lifeline stretching through the void, drawing Emily's essence toward her, away from the grasping shadows, but then, a thunderous laughter erupted all around, echoing in the depths of her mind. "Do you think you can defy me?" James's voice reverberated like an earthquake, drowning out her thoughts. The shadows surged harder, flickers of Emily's laughter mingling with the mockery. Ruth felt herself being pulled apart, each strand of her essence yanked back by the shadows. The world twisted, collapsing around her, distorting everything she knew. "Yes, Ruth. Embrace it. Your daughter will be mine." James taunted, slivers of his darkness sparking dangerously close, everything hung in a fragile balance. Ruth gritted her teeth, bracing against the pull. "No. I will find you, Emily. I promise." As the darkness roared, shattering her resolve, Ruth took a deep breath and summoned every ounce of strength, every shred of love. This wasn't just a fight for herself. It was for Emily, and in that pivotal moment, a small flicker of hope ignited within her. The shadows loomed, but she wouldn't let them consume her mom. And then, all fell silent as the light erupted once more, bringing with it an eerie calm, but Ruth felt dread creeping up her spine. What awaited her on the other side of this inevitable clash? What if, beneath the surface of darkness, something darker still awaited? Ruth blinked as the light consumed her, burning her vision for a moment before clarity emerged from the chaos. She stood at the edge of a different reality, the air thick with oppressive silence. The swirling shadows had dissipated, but a deeper chill settled into her bones. The unsettling calm echoed around her like a warning, hinting at something lurking within. "Emily?" Her voice trembled, echoing back at her from an unknown depth. She felt the weight of the absence of sound pressing down. It wasn't just that the shadows had vanished, it was the absence of anything that could resemble safety. Ahead of her, pulsating waves of an unnatural light beckoned. Ruth instinctively took a hesitant step toward it, the ground beneath her shifting as if it were alive, unsure of its own stability. Her heart raced as she crossed the threshold. What used to be the familiar walls of the protective circle now twisted into a grotesque imitation. The markings she had drawn with such care were now angry, jagged lines sprawled across a cracked surface, pulsing with malevolent energy. "Emily!" she cried, the desperation clawing at her throat again. The stillness was suffocating, stretching infinitely in every direction. She turned, each movement heavy in the eerie silence, then she heard it, a faint whisper, slipping through the cracks of the silence. "Mom, help me!" It was her daughter's voice, haunting yet cloaked in a desperate shadow, pulling Ruth forward like a moth to a flame. As she advanced, the whispers began to multiply, each echo warping into something sinister. The voices morphed into a cacophony, saturation of pleas, cries, and laughter twisted by despair. The shadows that once lurked in the corners flared back to life, swirling around her, now more monstrous than before. "Emily!" Show me where you are. Ruth screamed, but the shadows laughed, the sound a chorus of mocking jeers that churned in her gut. Suddenly, the air thickened, stinging her lungs. A figure began to materialize before her, wreathed in wisps of darkness. Emily's face emerged, but it was not the light of the girl she remembered. "Mom, it's too late," her daughter's voice warbled, drenched in sorrow. Ruth's heart fractured at the sight. This wasn't just Emily, this was the very essence of her fear and suffering. "No. Don't believe it. I'm here." Ruth lunged toward her, but the moment her fingers reached to grasp Emily's hand, the darkness surged. "Let her go!" Ruth shouted, and the very ground roared back like a wounded beast. The shadows coiled tighter, squeezing her until she gasped for breath, her vision blurred by tears. A familiar laugh sliced through the noise, cutting deep. "You think you can sever the ties I've woven? Your love is a flicker in my night, a candle snuffed out before it has a chance to burn bright. I own her now. James!" Ruth screamed, fury rising alongside despair. "I want to let you take her." But with each convulsion of her voice, the shadows closed in, feeding on her fear, on her hopelessness. Ruth felt her own strength wane, but then something pushed back against the suffocation, a thought, rebellious and fiery. "I will fight. I will not lose her to you." In one desperate movement, she slashed her arm across the air, breaking the swirling patterns of her bloodied echoes. The energy exploded, pushing against the darkness, scattering the fog. "Emily!" she pleaded, her voice steadying. "You can hear me. Fight back. We can escape. Mom! Help me." The plea rang clearer now, the light flickering back in Emily's eyes for just an instant, a beacon amid the swirling terror. The shadows hesitated, swirling once again as the bond of love fought to reconnect, igniting something deep inside Ruth. But then they surged back, a relentless tide fueled by James's dark laughter. "You cannot escape, Ruth. Darkness will always find you, and it hungers for more." As the shadows wriggled violently, Ruth braced herself. Something had to break. As the laughter echoed ever louder, a harrowing thought gripped her: what would they demand next? In that moment, she steeled her resolve, but deep fear clawed at her mind. What lay ahead would test not just her strength, but the very fabric of her spirit. The clash was imminent, and she knew, with every marrow of her being, the darkness was prepared to make its final move. Would she be brave enough to face it? "Emily, hold on!" Ruth shouted, as a terrible chill settled in the air, her pulse quickened with dread, the answer lurking just beyond the veil of shadows. What awaited her next could very well turn everything she loved into nothing but echoes in the void. Ruth stood there in the unsettling silence, her heart racing as Emily's distorted voice echoed through the oppressive darkness. "Mom, it's too late." The tears flowed from Ruth's eyes, despair crashing over her like a wild tide against a crumbling shore. "No. I'm here. I will find you," she shouted, the desperation cutting through the echoing jeers around her. The shadows twisted and coiled around her like serpents, laughing cruelly at her efforts to break through. The figure of Emily emerged, flickering between the real and the imagined, her beautiful, innocent face clouded in the dark mists swirling around them. "Mom, please, it hurts. Save me." Each word tore into Ruth's soul like a dagger, the haunting agony echoed in each syllable. Ruth gritted her teeth, pulling from the depths of her being. "You! Let her go!" she screamed, her voice trembling with the force of her rage and love. The shadows giggled and flitted like phantoms, dancing to the rhythm of their torment. "You think you can stop me? You'll lose everything." James's voice sliced through the air, his laughter a cruel melody taunting her. "No." Ruth refused to back down. She clutched the blood-stained paper fiercely in one hand, the mark still vibrating with latent energy. "Emily, listen to me. You have to fight, sweetheart. Fight back. We can do this together. Mom. Emily's voice sharpened with clarity, a flicker of her true spirit shining through the despair. I'm scared. Then be scared with me, let us stand together. Ruth held her breath, gathering every ounce of resolve in her heart. She rushed toward the ghostly figure of Emily, feeling the shadows claw at her, but the connection between them shone like a beacon. Each inch she moved felt burdensome, the weight of darkness clawing desperately to pull her back, to make her doubt. James! Ruth screamed, her voice ringing out. You don't own her, and you won't take me either. The shadows shrieked in fury, trying to engulf her, but there was strength in her voice, a thunderous courage that rippled through despair. With a surge of energy, she took another step forward, eyes burning with determination. From the depths of this darkness, we will rise. She traced the protective symbol on the ground around her. The energy crackled, growing stronger with every breath. James snarled, a visible rage boiling beneath a mask of cold indifference. You think a simple mark can contain what I am? In that moment, Ruth felt the shadows waver, just for the briefest second. Emily. We are bound together. Focus on me. They were two hearts fighting against a savage storm, the tether of their love unwavering. Mom. Emily's voice shot through the shadowy whispers like a spear of hope. I can feel you. Then let us break these chains. Ruth bellowed, her spirit igniting into flames of determination. Clenching the paper tighter, she scanned the ground, where the chalk was slowly fading. This symbol wasn't just for her, it was for their bond, woven through the very essence of their love. With fierce resolution, Ruth crouched down again, chalking furiously against the creeping darkness. I bind you. She shouted, drawing circles and symbols like a war incantation, crafting a sanctuary with the power of their shared love. No. You will never win. James's voice howled, his dark cry tinged with desperation. The shadows surged forward, a violent storm set on drowning her hope, but Ruth's symbols glowed brighter, resisting the onslaught. They were pushing back through the darkness, weaving love into their creations, warming the chilling air as they fought against fate. Together. Ruth shouted, and suddenly the ground shook. Together. Emily echoed, a resounding chorus that pushed against the shadows. And in that moment, Ruth felt a seismic shift coursing through her muscles. Emily's figure glowed brighter, the shadows recoiling at the intensity of their bond. A brilliant light erupted between them, illuminating the thick fog, transforming it into a tempest of swirling colors. I won't lose you. Ruth cried, feeling the force of their love as an avalanche sweeping through. Despair. A final symbol completed, and the energy snapped like a rubber band, ricocheting through the darkness. With one resounding shout, Ruth and Emily strained against the darkness. And then, with a heart-stopping surge, the shadows collapsed as if caught in a powerful vortex. No. You can't do this. James howled, his rage a final, chilling scream before being devoured by the growing light, and then silence. Ruth blinked against the brightness that enveloped them. The darkness was gone, replaced by a warm glow where the shadows had once lurked. Emily? Her voice trembled, filled with anxious hope. Mom. Emily's arms wrapped around her, pulling Ruth into a tight embrace. I thought I lost you. Oh, baby, never. Ruth held her daughter close, the warmth of their bond driving away the cold remnants of terror that had encircled them for far too long. They pulled apart, wide smiles breaking across their faces. We did it, Ruth whispered, her heart pounding with disbelief. The store felt like a different world now. Light filled the aisles, the atmosphere palpable with renewed energy. No more shadows, no more whispers. I love you, Ruth said, holding Emily's face in her hands, tears brimming. We will always fight together. I love you too, Mom, she replied, determination glistening in her eyes. As they walked toward the exit, hand in hand, Ruth took a deep breath, every step feeling lighter than before. They were free. They had faced the abyss, turned the tide and emerged stronger. Each heartbeat thrummed with the promise of brighter days ahead. No more nightmares bound them. Love had forged the strongest bond of all, and nothing would break that unity ever again. It was over, the chill of the night faded behind as they stepped outside into the crisp air, a new dawn breaking on the horizon, and so they walked, leaving the shadows of Walmart behind, ready to face whatever came next together. If you've made it this far, it's time to act. You need to subscribe now, so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and show your support for what you love. And flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. Let us discuss together. Please, don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this incredible conclusion. Only true fans know the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.